You're listening to Contesting Wrestling. This podcast has chronicled my journey as somebody who does not care for wrestling to try to become somebody who does not care for wrestling but has an understanding and appreciation of it. And in that way, it's been moderately successful. However, it's not over. This journey isn't over. Like we're in the last chapter, we're in the last act, but there's still this is a huge, one might say a daunting and bafflingly large body of media that exists, and we're getting through it, and it's still important for me to hear people's to hear a variety of opinions on it, right? To hear and today is going to be about delving into, I'm assuming you know what the deal is, right? If this is the first episode you're listening to, the fuck you doing? Go listen to episode 1. Are you an insane person? Who does that? I guess it's fairly common podcast stuff. That's not important. What is important is that today's going to be an interesting episode where we try to get an angle on one element of wrestling that not only am I overtly hostile to, but also my co-hosts also are a bit hostile to. And so it'll be interesting I'm talking about Johnny Gargano. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. Dr. Diamondfire, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I will do that again if you have not been listening. You don't know who I am. You might. My name is Dr. Diamondfire. I've been in professional wrestling about 13 years now. I've done a little bit of everything. I've wrestled. I've done every job there is to do backstage. I've done commentary. I've done ring announcing. You can hire me to do commentary now. My DMs are open. And I'm happy to be doing this podcast with everybody. And I don't know if I'm hostile towards everything, but this is Contesting Wrestling, not we all love everything about wrestling. You can find that in, all of the podcasts that are out there that don't just crap on wrestling, which is equally as bad. And I'm going to throw it to you, Dr. Abelson. How you doing
all
today?
right. For people who might be listening to this podcast for the first time now, because perhaps they are friends or relatives of our guests today. Hi, new people.
Sorry.
Thanks for tuning in.
Sorry, everybody. I'm sure you're very nice, and I'm glad that you've chosen this episode.
Our guest doesn't have
and
legions of fans?
Of course, the millions and millions of his fans as well.
There you go.
I am Dr. Ben Abelson. I am a professor of philosophy at Mercy College, which is especially relevant to today's episode because our guest was a student of mine at Mercy College, not of wrestling, of philosophy. One day I'll teach the philosophy of wrestling class, but by now he has graduated from Mercy College. He is an aspiring 3D graphic artist and 3D modeling and 3D texture artist. AJ Tignonsini, welcome to the Contesting Wrestling podcast. Thanks for being here.
I'm very welcome. I'm a little disappointed that graphic design was in the word, but I applaud either way. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly all right. Thank you again.
We've established that Ben is not a doctor of remembering things.
Ironically. But anyways, thank you again for having me here. I am just simply here listening to all of you, tightly holding my wonderful friend Goldie over here, as I am also excruciatingly nervous as to getting completely roasted based on the topic that's going to be happening
For those
today.
who don't know,
We ain't
for
gonna
those who
roast
don't
you.
know, Goldie was the name Tommaso Ciampa gave to the NXT Championship belt, which AJ is clutching a replica of at the moment.
That is exactly true, and I will be
Not
doing
to be
it.
confused with Big Goldie, which was the latter-day WCW belt.
I can.
Into the World Heavyweight Championship.
Oh
yes.
boy, yes, that belt. We're gonna pretend like WWE never owned that belt ever. They did, but they didn't.
Oh, they owned it for years.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't. I don't know what you're talking about.
They did for a lot of years. They did better things with that belt than WCW.
Yeah,
did
starting
a lot
in
of the time.
1991
If you watch
when
WCW.
Flair brought it over.
Oof, I was just watching that. That's amazing.
Now,
I haven't.
We didn't watch any of that on the podcast today.
Now I do want to make it clear that there's no roasting. There's no roasting is coming, or at least no roasting of you. I may roast Johnny Gargano with my words,
Oh boy.
because of my feelings about him. But I am a lot more interested in, because people people clearly love Johnny Gargano, right? Like it's not like it's not like you, by choosing this match, are like some sort of straight freak wandering the woods saying, "Oh, look at this match," and being the only person who would say such a thing. Like clearly people really love this, and I have a tough time. I have a tough time. That's all. And I want to understand Johnny Gargano. It's sort of a microcosm of the general struggle of this podcast, in that I don't get the appeal of Johnny Gargano outside of his willingness to go hard for long periods of time, which I recognize and appreciate, but I don't see outside of that really what's going on with him. So that's my goal, at least in discussing the first match today.
And that first match is Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole for the then vacant NXT Championship in a 2 out of 3 falls match at NXT TakeOver New York 2019, which you were present for live. Right,
yes, yes, I was. I was there. I was there with my dad we were way in the back, but we did get like a nice diagonal view of the ring. Basically,
nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely not.
The Barclays Center is a good place to see wrestling. I don't quite like it as much as the Garden, the old Madison Square Garden, but
well, the Garden will always be the Garden. You know, I went to a SmackDown taping shortly before quarantine at the Barclays Center, and I thought it was great.
Oh, yes.
AJ, before you launch into your feelings about Johnny Gargano, I just want to say that one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, besides the fact that you are one of a few students over the years who I became friends with because of wrestling.
That is certainly true.
That I see you as, to some degree, representative of the contemporary WWE and NXT fan, and that your perspective will represent that sort of demographic to some degree.
Yes, certainly. So I think why I fit that demographic so much terribly, and why my love for NXT is so strong, it also comes from a lot of years of just built up hatred towards the main roster of WWE, of just constant bad story decision making, and the lack of wrestling, if you know what I mean, the hindering of these over the top moves because of a PG audience. And
let me ask you something that's important.
Yes.
When did you start watching wrestling, and what is it that you watched? And kind of as a side thing, who was your first favorite?
So I started watching wrestling in 2009. I gotten into it thanks to my cousin. I was kind of going through some stuff at the time, and he wanted to cheer me up a little bit. And my first match that I've ever seen was CM Punk versus Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell. That was the first wrestling match I ever watched. And looking back on it, as a kid, you're like, at first you're like, okay, maybe, you're like, okay, cool. Dead man versus arrogant white man from Chicago, Illinois. Like that's nothing to be super excited about. But looking back on it, it opened up a new world to me for really dynamic storytelling. And really, it was kind of wacky to begin, because again, you're seeing a regular like athletic man go up against what is supposedly just like a 7 foot tall undead muscling monster.
A man from the zombie race.
Yes. So Undertaker and Punk were like my first 2 favorite wrestlers. I still love Punk to this day. I still love him to this day as like my all-time favorite wrestlers. So that lingers with me to like my favoritism towards certain wrestlers.
At the time, I remember, like, because I was already, like, a year or 2 into, like, the wrestling business by then. And I remember most of the old heads just talking trash on CM Punk. And, like, I try to say even then to them, it's like, people are, like, getting into wrestling because of this guy. And they just completely would scoff at it. The same way I tell them people are getting into wrestling because of Orange Cassidy now. They're like, but that's not what I like about wrestling. It's like, right, exactly. The people who are starting to watch wrestling didn't like what you liked about wrestling, but they like this show. So that's my soapbox for now.
Doc and I don't like Johnny Gargano, but you do.
I love Johnny Gargano. What else is there for me to say?
He's a quick maybe not too quick, but before we get into the specifics, I do want to ask the universal guest question, which is, in general, why do you, when faced with the question that haunts all human beings of what do I do with my limited time on this earth, why wrestling? Why fill that time with wrestling and not, or at least the time that you do, not to say that you do 24/7 wrestling, but why wrestling over other art forms? Why is wrestling worth delving into for somebody?
At least for me back then, wrestling was a good way for me to come out of my social shell. It taught me to be extroverted with my emotions to a very exaggerated degree, and then I had to learn to tone it down after a few years. I learned how to extrovert the basic the common emotions of happiness, sadness, optimism, pessimism, which a lot of wrestlers would still do to this day. That's the art form of wrestling. It's at least when it comes to promos. When it came to the wrestling itself, and the reason why I love wrestling is just because it's a beautiful art skill to see and study just interesting ways of the body, just of the human body itself, just doing all these weird flips and all these weird and outstanding like athletic lifts. Like, yeah, you see that in other sports too, but with wrestling specifically, it's basically like watching a superhero movie.
Do you find the visual stimulus of wrestling to be inspiring and influential on your visual arts work yourself?
Yes, it definitely does. It has to a very big degree like improved my anatomy over the years when sculpting and Maya, ZBrush, or even just like doing a sketch. So also as someone who has studied graphic design, looking at the motion graphic Titantrons and looking at all the different types of logos and watching the motions move around, I'll say it's gotten better over the
Definitely.
years. Looking back on it, when they first introduced the Titantron in 2008, Jesus Christ, Vince was way too cheap to hire an art team and was just like, what are you doing?
Just like everything from the costumes to the logos to like the music and all of that other stuff, like, was always just embarrassingly cheesy and out of date until, except maybe for a little moment in the Attitude Era, and then very recently they seem to catch up with the rest of pop culture rather quickly.
To sort of bring it back into this match, one of my favorite WWE logos of all time is the Undisputed Era logo. Also the analogy of CFOs with the last names of all the wrestlers that are in it, and it forms this really nice, cool little triangular emblem, which really shows like how they worked well and how they were close to each other.
I think, yeah. I mean, we're going to talk about Gargano, of course, but with Cole and the Undisputed Era, I think a lot of their appeal comes from a design perspective, right? Comes from how they look together, how they walk out to the ring, all of that kind of stuff. For sure.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't really put a lot of thought into really how much design goes into, like, because each wrestler has to have a series of images attached to them, and those images, it's not going to be finely detailed illustration. It's going to be like something simple, and I hadn't thought of that.
Broad strokes and branding, that's what kids remember. That's what you remember first before you can remember anything with more detail.
Yeah, I thought Bret Hart's gear just looked cool. I mean, it's fucking cheesy now, the skull with wings and a heart around it. But as a kid, I was like, oh, that's kind of looks cool. It's a cool combination of elements.
If like revised in a certain way, it can be a good logo. It can be good. It just needs a little bit of tweaking here and there. So,
and the idea of like the motorcycle hard-edged like skull with wings, but then softened by the heart around it,
Well, I mean, it's better than having his. It's better than having his logo like a sniper rifle as to the nickname the Hitman, because a Hitman,
absolutely,
that would have been really bad.
All right, so yeah, so we have this match, and it was supposed to be Ciampa and Gargano. It was supposed to be the ultimate blow of their incredible feud. Like we've said before, and we've covered a couple of those matches. You know, I've said that I'm not particularly interested in either of those wrestlers, but I thought the storytelling was so good with their feud that I got into their matches nonetheless.
I always liked Tommaso Ciampa. I mean, I was at I worked for Chikara for several years, and we brought him in once when we were doing Chicago, and I'll always remember he was one of those guys who made sure to go around to everyone on the crew and look them in the eye and shake their hand and thank them for what they did before and after the show. And, that
huge,
helps,
man.
Buddy. It helps.
Really goes a long way. If you're in any kind of performing thing, I don't know, all the years I was in bands, I was, like, always amazed at how many people would just be, like, a dick to the sound guy. It's like, she's like,
yeah, right.
Like, just treat him like a fucking person.
Yeah.
I don't. Also, like, he's gonna decide if you sound good or not.
Right.
So what do you fucking do? Like, it's like why would a wrestler? Like, I'm sure there are wrestlers who come in and are kind of dicks to the guys who like build the ring that they're gonna land on a whole bunch that they really need to be well constructed.
I want to give a shout out to Molly Holly for her Hall of Fame speech, where she named all the members of the crew by name and shouted them out in the very short amount of time she had to speak.
Yeah, she was supposed to have like 15 minutes, and then Vince was like, no, 2 minutes. For whatever reason he thought was rational at the time.
Well, it had to do with like the Hall of Fame this year being so truncated and everything. But Molly said when she heard that, like, she cried because it gave her flashbacks of back when she was wrestling, when they'd be told, oh, you get 10 minutes, and they'd be the only women's match on the show, and then they'd get to the curtain and it'd be like, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we'll cut out our whole match. I'll do my finish, and then we'll go home.
At least when she left, at least she didn't get her stuff like sent in a UPS trash bag. Just saying.
Yeah, or stuffed in a box and stamped with return to OVW.
So this match, it didn't end up being Gargano and Ciampa, and so Cole and Gargano had a lot to live up to here. They really, there was a huge weight on their shoulders to deliver a dramatic, powerful, climactic main event without much of a story between them. The only story is that Cole won the Fatal 5-Way, right? And
there is a story. There is a story if you really think about it up to that point. And here, so Johnny Gargano at the time has basically been like scratching and clawing his way to the main title. He eventually got to the North American title, but that was Ciampa. That was he being manipulated to not going out to the main title. Cole, when he came into NXT, he, like Johnny Gargano said, he had a red carpet walked out for him. He debuted at the Barclays Center. He got a lot of attention very quickly. He was winning match after match after match. First ever North American champion, head of a game-changing stable, and now is all of a sudden in the main event of the Barclays.
So the overachiever against the underachiever underdog.
Pretty much.
Adam Cole has always been one of those guys. He's like Shawn Michaels. He just shows up and wins, and like maybe it pisses you off, but you can deal with it because it's just going to keep happening. And I think it's just going to keep happening. One of these days, Adam Cole is just going to show up on a way too high point of the card on SmackDown or something, and we're just going to have to.
Cole's another guy I'm not crazy about. I wonder, Evan, we know how you feel about Gargano. What was your impression of Adam Cole, baby?
I got kind of I got sort of a generic kind of. Did you ever watch Sons of Anarchy?
I haven't. I know a little bit about it.
He's kind of gave me a vibe of a guy who was on Sons of Anarchy and didn't have he had a couple lines, but they never named his character. Sort of like he just sort of was like a generic kind of I guess I'm a bad-ish guy.
He gives me very much like a Tom Cruise vibe. Like he looks a little bit like Tom Cruise facially, and he's shorter than he should be for his character. And
he does look like
he's a complex for him.
He does look like there's no way he doesn't know about horrific labor violations that are occurring, but he's not going to tell anybody about them because he benefits from them. But Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise knows.
Okay.
Everybody who knows is
my
close
God.
to Tom Cruise says that there's no way he doesn't know about the Scientology slavery.
And let's put it.
But it's working so
Since
well
Doc
for him.
mentioned Shawn Michaels, like these two guys, and you see it in the match, have very much kind of been branded implicitly as Shawn's boys in NXT. And I think he might have been the agent for this match. But it makes a lot of sense to me that he would take these two guys under his wing. One, they're never going to be as good as him.
Is the whole Bebe?
nobody's ever gonna be
I
as
doubt
good.
that opinion. I'm just throwing that out there right now. I severely doubt that.
Yeah, well, they got a few more years to go.
But
What's up, Evan?
So Bebe, is that like he calls you Bebe?
He says
Is that what it
Adam
is?
Cole, and then the whole crowd says Bebe with him.
So he's
They've been doing that since well before he was even in the WWE. It just starts. It's a cliche in a promo, just like saying, "It's like Adam Cole, baby,"
Sure.
and then he starts doing it deliberately, and then the fans start picking it up, and now he doesn't even say it; the fans just say it for him. All of that really comes down to copying one of the earlier versions of Chris Jericho, and like that is specifically my problem with both of these guys. They both I don't hate either of them, but both of them to me, I know I'm a grumpy old wrestling fan, but they both seem like copies of copies of copies. Like Gargano, is lucky that Alex Shelley didn't really pursue wrestling on a higher level because he's aping a bunch of shit out of the Shelley playbook. Shelley, when he was younger, was just copying everything Chris Jericho could do in hopes to get over. And Jericho, when he was younger, was just copying Shawn Michaels, which brings us all back to Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
And Shawn Michaels might be the best in-ring competitor of all time, which is a whole other story.
My issue isn't so much the influence there, because that's always going to be the case with wrestling. But that there's something lost in the copying. And the main thing and I don't know how AJ feels about this, but the main thing that I think is lost
We'll find out.
the wrestling storytelling. So I actually enjoyed watching the match back more than I expected to. It's fairly long. There's a lot going on. But they keep it.
I would say it's extremely
It's
long.
quite long, yeah.
I think they could have cut 20 minutes out of the middle and it would have been fine.
They kept my interest with all of the dazzling spots that they do. The problem, and they know a lot of moves, and a lot of them are impressive. A lot of them are fucking stupid as hell, like the Panama Sunrise. But we'll get into that later.
Boy.
But they do a lot of moves, but they don't mean anything. There's no story told through the moves. There's no working on a body part. There's no build up from one move, from earlier moves that aren't quite as impactful to moves that are impactful. Example, case in point, the most frustrating point for me in the entire match. They do an insane Poison Rana, an inverted Frankensteiner, where Adam Cole looks like he was just driven directly on his head in a way that should have paralyzed him if someone was really trying to do that to him. And what does he do? He doesn't even stay down for a second. He pops back up to his knees to take a super kick, falls out of the ring, and then gets immediately back up, grabs Gargano, and does another move to him. That move, if you're going to have it in the match, should be towards the finish, but it's early in the match and nothing comes from it. And so then when other moves happen later in the match, it's like, all right, these are kind of exciting, but none of them got as big of a pop as that move, and none of them look like they did as much damage as that move. So why should I be believing that they're going to get the pin, in the end?
I can definitely understand that frustration of not just that in particular, but also having big moves and then not having it loop back. Like they could have played a little bit of an injury there. I do agree with that. I saw the storytelling in the two of these men in the beginning of the match, how they're constantly doing these spots to try and outsmart the other. This match plays on deception, both through each other, but also through the crowd. Because as you notice, after the second fall, when it's neck and neck for the third fall, whomever scripted this match literally did everything in their power to make the audience think that Johnny Gargano was not going to win that match. And that goes down from the fairy tale ending outside of the ring to getting a near count out to Adam Cole like constantly beating on Gargano to pin him down. Even there was this one spot like not too long after where he goes for the pin, Johnny Gargano kicks out, and then Adam Cole just starts having like a fit as a kid. Like, what the hell do I need to do to kill you? I'm doing everything in my power. And then, of course, that leads into the tap out with the Gargano escape, and then the Undisputed Era come in to interfere, which there might have been a little bit of a foreshadowing in the beginning when they all just leave Adam Cole to fight for himself, which they never did. And then all of a sudden at the end of the match, you see Roderick Strong like coming out and distracting the referee, and then Gargano gets jumped. That at that moment was at least the way I saw it was,
oh shit, they're gonna screw it.
Pretty much the peak of the point where like, this is it. This is like, and my dad next to me, for context, he was pissed as hell because not, it's clever what they did, but also like, if there's one thing he doesn't like in wrestling, it's a fuck finish. And that was, by definition, that was kind of a fuck finish if you think about it.
Yeah.
And that plays into the beginning of the story of how Adam Cole gets everything handed to him, where literally he was being handed that win after everything. He gets tired of trying to put Gargano away and just said, fuck it, my friends are giving me a lift, I'm gonna take that and take advantage of it.
That makes a lot of sense. Of course, you know, to be invested enough to feel those near falls and to feel like, oh shit, they're gonna screw him, you gotta care about the babyface. And let's
dig into that a little bit. Like what is to you, what, like, so who is Johnny Gargano? Like, I have never quite been able to make sense of his character. How would you describe Johnny Gargano, and what is it you like about him?
I see Johnny Gargano as, well, in many ways I kind of see him like myself, but through a regular wrestling fan, he is supposed to be the sympathy guy. Like, he kind of didn't really have a character in the beginning when he was a DIY. He was just sort of like generic mid-card, high-flying babyface, and then all of a sudden Ciampa just screws him over, and then all of a sudden, like, oh shit, like, you good, buddy? And then everything starts going good for him. Ciampa comes back. He basically just starts getting screwed over between his old tag team partner, constantly losing matches, and then he goes crazy.
And so now he's a heel. But so I guess, you know, a part of what's going on there is, to begin with, the DIY thing, right? The fact that this is a little guy, there isn't that much really that's special about him to begin with, but he scratches and claws and works his ass off and finds his way into the big time, or the sort of big time, the NXT, you know, however he possibly can. And he did it all himself. He did it all his way. He did it with his friend, and there's this camaraderie between them. And then this guy who worked his ass off to get where he is starts getting screwed, including by his friend and partner. And so you feel sympathy for him for that, right? The hardworking guy who shouldn't have made it, but made it anyway, but didn't really make it. He's almost there. He's about to grab the brass ring, and then nobody's letting him.
I think why people like him so much, at least from an NXT fan, is because I think he is what Sami Zayn should have been at his peak. Because I saw Sami Zayn as that, Sami Zayn, El Generico, whatever you want to call him, as that, you know, upcoming babyface who he's likable. He, you know, everybody loves him. He loves everybody. And then he gets screwed over by his best friend. He loses the NXT championship within a matter of weeks. And then he fades away from NXT.
I think that's part of the problem, though, is like that it's kind of a common story. Now, I think for Gargano, like the length of it and the sort of the intensity when it came to his relationship with Ciampa and all that helped. But, you know, for me, it's like there's got to be something else on top of it.
Well, just sympathy, you know, you need sympathy, but then also a reason to believe that the person you're sympathetic towards should win. And that's, you know, that's tricky. You know, Nick Dinsmore talked about when he was playing Eugene, how it had gotten way over for a hot minute. And they were like, all right, you're going to have a match with Triple H. Everybody hated Triple H at the time, you know, and he came out and everyone booed him because as much as they liked the character and as much sympathy as he had, they weren't buying him as a main event guy against Triple H. In Gargano's case, like, he's got the moves. He's a very good athlete.
That he's got the moves that really move them, the fans.
Yep.
No, but that's the thing. He doesn't. He has the moves that he saw on a creator wrestler set in a video game. Adam Cole has mostly the same move set, which is why they do the same moves at the same time a bunch of times in this match. In spots that, like, to me, were supposed to be like, oh, they're evenly matched, but I just saw them as like, why are you doing the same stuff, guys?
And it did.
You already just kicked out of a bunch of stuff. Why are you doing the same stuff, guys?
It felt more heavily choreographed. At least up top.
Their style, that's the other kind of complaint of us old heads about their kind of style, is that they work out everything from beginning to end. None of it is really called in the ring. None of it is improvised. They don't really work. Like
right. It works a lot better in PWG in front of 300 people who want to see the most extreme show of moves that they can see. But then you bring it to the TV audience, and it's missing that last layer of psychology that all of the real main eventers have ever had. In
old wrestling, even in like ECW, when they were doing crazy spots and stuff, they'd play to the crowd, then they'd do a flurry of crazy shit, and then they'd sell for a while and play to the crowd more, and then work into the next flurry of crazy shit. Until the very end of the match, when Cole finally gets in Gargano's face and is like, you're just a loser, or something like that. You're just going to lose again and again, or whatever. That's the first time that we see any kind of character expressed by either guy in the entirety of this long match.
And you know, I thought that was dumb because it was like, all right, how come you're not still fighting? It seemed like the kind of thing that would happen in a movie where the villain stops doing the thing to talk while the good guy wins purely because the bad guy stopped doing things to talk.
Personally, I didn't mind that, like, there wasn't really like dialogue between them until the end because at least in most of wrestling,
I would have been fine with no dialogue, honestly. But yeah, no. Tell me what you think.
Actions speak louder than words, and I know that's very generic to say, but I thought you got a sense of what they were going through when they were doing those like crazy spots earlier. You got a sense of what both of them were thinking when they were like both really fast paced as they're both racing to the top. They're trying to match each other's speed. So, and at the end, after all those fuck finishes, then you have Adam Cole saying that you're done. And this is my time. This is my show. I'm the best. You can fuck off. And that at least sets a stage of sympathy of holy shit, like this is it. Like he's
gonna beat him with another last shot. But then he reverses it into the Gargano special, which he tapped him out with for the second fall as well.
Yep.
And the first fall, he lost to the last shot, and he gets pinned by it, and then immediately the second fall starts, and Cole does another last shot, and this one Gargano kicks out of, and it's the first time anyone's ever kicked out of the last shot. I would have done it the other way around. I mean...
Yeah, me too. I would have had him kick out of the first one and then go down to the second one.
But hey.
Or else it makes it seem like an accident.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's me.
Now, okay, now to play a little bit to the other side real quick. I do love this match. There are some things that are imperfect about it, like that spot that you mentioned in particular. Another thing that I thought was kind of good, but also kind of okay, was the fairy tale ending spot onto the table. Not because the table didn't break. If anything, I thought, if anything, it's more painful when it doesn't break, and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. The fairy tale ending being the, we used to call it the angel's wings when Christopher Daniels would do it.
Yes, I did. I don't like that spot because I felt that spot was out of nowhere. Well, yes, you get aware that, like, you're aware of what Johnny Gargano went through with Ciampa. I felt like they could have foreshadowed it more if Adam Cole was teasing more like Tommaso Ciampa taunts towards him. Like when he gestures towards a wrestling belt, he could like pretend to crush it in his hands, which is what Tommaso Ciampa does.
I like stuff like that.
Or he could have done something stupid, which I was gonna predict for the last Brooklyn with Tommaso Ciampa's entrance was I thought Ciampa was gonna come out to the DIY theme song, and then Johnny Gargano at the beginning of the match has a breakdown basically. You could have done that. It corny as shit, but like do something, foreshadow something with Ciampa besides that move.
Yeah.
If he would have done some of that earlier, I feel like it would have made that move a lot more meaningful personally.
So, I was just going to say, like, with Gargano, he, it seems like his character, it seems like the core of his character is that he wants to be known as somebody who's good at wrestling.
Johnny Wrestling, as it were.
Johnny Wrestling, and he wants to do a lot, and does a lot of wrestling. Every time we've watched a Johnny Gargano match, it's gone on for a long period of time, and he's in like some of the best and most hard to maintain, like not just really good shape, but he's in a kind of shape that is hard to maintain.
He has almost no body fat.
Yeah, like most wrestlers have
disgusting.
some level of body fat because it's just hard to fucking live I'm not sure who the modern
sit-ups.
like ideal is now. Like for years it was sort of like people would talk about like, oh, I want to look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club or whatever, right? But like without realizing that like those guys, like he was fucking like, not eating for 24 hours or just like eating ice chips or whatever. Before they shot.
Completely dehydrated.
You actually just reminded me of something that adds to Johnny Gargano's character. And
sure.
As an NXT fan, not just me, but everyone who loves NXT, up until that era in NXT, it was pretty much not even a C show, but basically like, minor leagues of wrestling, where like every 6 to 7 months you have a new set of wrestlers and a new set of main eventers, and you feel like people get called up really quickly. When you come to that era of NXT in 2016, 2017, a lot of people stayed after a long time when they thought they should have got called up.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's why people love Johnny Gargano so much, is because he decided
because he'll never get called up.
That's interesting to me because that's
a good thing.
That's very specifically one of the reasons why I fell off of NXT. Like, I loved NXT for years. One of the things I loved the most about it is that people did not hang around. You won the title. When you lost the title, it seemed like, okay, you're gonna leave. So when you have, like, when Sasha Banks did her tearful farewell, like, I believed it. It's like, man, she had a great run in NXT. Hope she's gonna do well on the main roster. And of course she did. Years and years, big star and everything. But like, I thought that was the appeal of NXT, that people weren't, because the thing that I hate the most about the main roster, that people are just there forever. They don't leave. They don't move. Roman Reigns has been on top for longer than Hulk Hogan was on top during his big run. And that's a big
all right, and that's a good
problem.
segue to our other match.
Oh boy!
Hold on. We should get to the other match pretty shortly. I don't think we're gonna have quite as much to cover for it. But yeah, so Cole versus Gargano. Both of these guys are still in NXT a couple of years later, and at this point, I don't give a shit about either of them. Like, I really did like, by the way, the Gargano and Ciampa storyline. Thought it was great beginning to end. I thought the DIY tag team was great.
Was one of those... sorry to interrupt you, but I was just like one
Yeah.
of those matches we watched on here. I remember like describing as operatic.
That's right.
Like it really was. Like for all that
Yeah.
I don't care, for all that I really don't like Gargano, like that match was fucking a little long, but like
a little long.
you know.
I saw their match in Brooklyn, before this, and I thought it was fantastic. But like Gargano's heel turn is like he needed to because he had faced all the heels and it wouldn't matter anymore. And he just seems like he's in the way of all the guys coming up. And the thing that the way is very good. The thing that I love the most about NXT is that nobody ever seemed in the way. My favorite NXT superstar of all time is probably Asuka. And like she was the most in the way and it was awesome because you couldn't beat her. And she wasn't even ever beat. She vacated the title when she got injured, and then she had the decency to move to the main roster. So the next set of women could.
And guess what? Charlotte Flair beat her.
Yeah. So wait, hold on.
No. I want an answer to this.
What do you mean? So, all right. You want me to say it? I'm gonna be blunt. Charlotte Flair should not have beaten Asuka. I stand by that opinion. You know why? Honestly, I am because I am biased towards Charlotte Flair. I do not like her as an in-ring performer. That's my reason.
She's such a good heel. It's incredible. All right, we can move on now.
Yes,
I said.
Okay, no. I'm not just gonna bulldoze over you with that. My answer to that is that Asuka was the champion for a lot of last year. Asuka's now been on the main roster for several years. She was a huge star. She's established, and she's really only lost to a couple of people. Charlotte just came back from a long layoff. They're trying to put her back into the main event. Asuka could afford to lose to her. So, good. It's the call I would have made 100%. Because it pisses guys like you off when Charlotte wins. And that's whole
Charlotte's
point.
Entire character is she's going to win all the time when you don't want her to.
That's not a character all the time. It's been done before.
But she doesn't win all the time. If she won all the time, she wouldn't have lost the title a dozen times.
No, she's going to win.
You just think she wins all the time because it is.
And she's going to win also specifically in the moments when you want her to the least. Right? That's
she.
Because hey, she already got her title match and didn't just win the title.
But I wanted to say about the Johnny Gargano stable, Evan, is called The Way. It's him and his wife and Candice and two other people. They're called The Way. And I just realized that's perfect from what Doc was saying. They're in the way of all the other talents.
In the way.
It makes also a lot of sense. And I always just want to say, Gargano, for me, works way better as a heel. He's not likable. He's this little fucking sniveling, annoying jerk. And that works. When he plays that character, like, I believe it. I still don't believe him fucking kicking out of like 8 different power moves in a match, but you know.
I mean, I like him as a face and a heel. That's just biases right there. And I'll admit it.
Once again, we can talk heatedly, but like, I'm happy you're on, and I'm happy to have someone to disagree with on this. Thank you for coming on.
Awesome.
I'm not trying to be like, you suck. No, you're good.
Awesome.
This is art. This is contesting wrestling.
All right, now that we have 5 seconds, the figure 8 is a horrible finisher. It looks painful when you put it on, and when Charlotte does it, it looks like she's having an erection. There, I said it.
It does look weird. I'm a big
fantastic.
fan of Charlotte, but I agree with you that it is a weird finish. When she does the full bridge, I've never understood why that's supposed to make it appear more painful or intense. I find it nonsensical.
It looks like she's in more pain, to be honest, but
yeah.
Like, why does Adam Cole have to jump off the ropes and do that goofy bounce?
Don't draw attention to the fact that the ring is bouncy.
All right, hold up. All right, now let's since Adam Cole is the subject of the match, I think we could talk about the Panama Sunrise a little bit. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Anybody that tries to do Petey Williams as Canadian Destroyer and kicks out of it, please, from the bottom of my heart, go fuck yourself.
Seriously, it was one of the best moves in wrestling, and now it's something that people who aren't athletic do to prove that they can do something when it's really easy. I like it when Ricky Morton pulls it out. I think it's great, but you ain't Ricky Morton.
I thought it was a good spot for Bad Bunny to do in the WrestleMania match because it made him look, incredibly athletic.
But right, Adam Cole uses it as a high spot that people kick out of, and then they're surprised. And honestly, I don't know why anybody's surprised when anybody kicks out of any of Adam Cole's moves, because all of his matches have 45 near falls in it, to the point where when the finish comes, I don't care, because after every kick out, it's like, is this the one?
And then the finish is the same move that they keep kicking out of. It's just another fucking last call.
Right.
All right. So okay, let's move on. Can we move on to the other match? All right.
Yes, I'm good.
Roman Reigns
to move on. I wanted to get
Roman Reigns defending the Universal title against Kevin Owens in a last man standing match at this year's Royal Rumble 2021. Now, to start it off, we already talked about when we talked about the WrestleMania triple threat, the transformation of Roman Reigns, and in my eyes, Roman Reigns sucked until last SummerSlam, and now he's fucking awesome. He's the best thing in wrestling. He's really the only thing, like the only guy that I will go out of my way to tune in for in WWE right now.
And I do agree with that.
But as Doc pointed out, he has been on top for a long, long time now. At the expense of some people like Mr. Kevin Owens, who many believe, I believe you, AJ, believe, has not gotten his due. Is that right?
Okay. No, he has not. He had his due for a little bit back in 2016, 2017. And I don't know if they're holding off until live crowds to finally give him his moment. But that's another thing, too. I know this is probably mentioned a lot on the podcast in terms of live crowds versus, general wrestling matches. But I'm just going to nail this into the ground. This match sucked without a live crowd. I'm sorry. For the story that they were going with here and the lack of a live crowd, it draws attention away from the intensity of the emotions between the wrestlers. That was my problem with Drew McIntyre's match against Brock Lesnar last year. He got robbed, and I hold that dearly. I'm sorry.
I mean, generally, I think we're all in agreement here that wrestling doesn't quite work without the live crowd. Like, they try, and some people do better than others.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
I maintain, I think I said this about the Thunderdome the first time it came up. Like, I don't know what else I would do. Like, I can't, like, it seems like given the situation, it seems like a fine solution if you have the kind of insane money that WWE does, where you can build that. I thought in this match, I agree with you, HA, that this match proved that stuff like this doesn't really work without an audience, because what they did was kind of the most interesting and creative thing that they could do. And
like fighting amidst the Thunderdome, like going up the levels.
Level up.
That pisses me off because of the fact that, like, okay, you're fighting next to a bunch of electronic screens, and that may be a little bit hardcore and witty, but like, I imagine that fighting with the fans. I imagine that fighting in the crowd.
But
I thought it was fucking great because we always see the guys fighting in the middle of crowds, and this was different. And they know they have a limited time to get in something like this, and this was the match they decided to do it in. They were like, let's fight several levels up in the Thunderdome, and then go backstage, not in the regular backstage, but backstage to where you see the practice ring that we have set up in this empty stadium. And I also so the big spot, and I'm going to bring it up, was Roman Reigns just completely hitting Kevin Owens with a golf cart. And AEW had recently before this done a spot that was similar, except the AEW spot, and I like the AEW spot, don't get me wrong, but the AEW spot was comedy. This was not comedy. This was vehicular
fucking
assault. And I thought it was great.
He really hit him with a golf cart.
Just being out there in the football field was kind of an allusion, perhaps, to AEW.
I mean, a painting in itself of that AEW golf cart is Kenny Omega pointing at Sammy Guevara, yelling at him, and Sammy Guevara like the funniest fucking rubber hose cartoon character just running for his life.
And that's the difference. That's what AEW to me is lacking is like that genuine pathos. They play things for laughs, things that are fucking serious, right? Like that's a brutal bump. And wrestling in general is fucking dangerous. And it's taking years away from your life potentially. It's, you know, the people are destroying their bodies. And if you're doing that for a laugh, I mean, why not just do something like XSW, where you're not really taking huge bumps and you're, you know, having a good time and you're drawing attention to the conventions of wrestling and in a funny way, and that's great. But if you're gonna be in the ring taking real bumps, risking your lives, it should fucking mean something.
I agreed. Yeah, that there is some truth to that, but maybe a little. I mean, but even though some outside wrestling fans, they sort of do see wrestling as a little bit of comedy in a way, like my friend Isaiah, he sees the similarities between fucking wrestling and Power Rangers. Like, it looks goofy, but like you're entertained by it.
Well, I don't think Ben's arguing that there should be no comedy in wrestling.
Certainly not.
Is that right, Ben? Yeah. No, you can definitely have comedy in wrestling. There's like, I don't know, the way it could be structured to take away from the stuff that's actually dangerous, I think. And sometimes just the mark a little.
But don't make the dangerous
Evan,
stuff.
I'm curious.
The funny stuff, really, you know.
Yeah. Evan, I'm curious to know what you think of just like the standing intensity of Kevin Owens. Does he do anything for you in that level? Because I can feel him when he's just standing there, kind of being intense.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that he was a good counter to Roman Reigns because he kind of is of similar stature and like strength, but stylistically seems pretty different.
They really represent these two different kind of ideals, where Reigns is just objectively a beautiful man. And that's part of why he's the top guy. Yeah, he just, you know, they want someone who looks like Roman Reigns as the face of their company. They don't want someone who looks like Kevin Owens as the face of their company. However, Kevin Owens looks a lot more like the average wrestling fan.
Sure.
And that's what gives him his special appeal as kind of an underdog in that way.
Well, yeah, and has like the relatable physique,
right?
Like like you look at him and you're like, all right, like if I really put the time in, I could get like strong like that.
Yeah. I remember they asked him in a shoot interview right before he signed his contract because he had gone to the WWE Performance Center. And everybody knew that. And they asked him, like, you know, they say when you go to the Performance Center, they do all kinds of, like, crazy cardio drills. And he's like, oh, yeah. And they're like, can you do those drills? And he's like, of course I can do it. Of course
you can do the crazy high-flying
shit. And, you know, you wonder, can he or can't he? And then you see him do 40-minute matches and not take a back step. And you're like, oh, right. This is just the way his body is shaped. You know, and don't think you can't have a body shape like that. If you put the work in, here's the thing. If you put the work into your body and it's still shaped like that, that's what your body's supposed to be shaped like. If your cardio's good, you're golden.
Oh yeah. I would say if you're working out regularly and you're eating like decently well and you keep that up for a while, whatever your body is doing after a couple years is what it's quote unquote supposed to be doing.
No, because that's the thing. No, of course he eats whatever he wants. I'm sure he does, and that's fine, man.
But I bet like when he works, he fucking works, you know? So
just a note about his technique. When he gets hit with that golf cart, he jumps up and takes a perfect flat back bump against the windshield.
Yeah.
Like he hit it with as much impact as possible, but also as safely as possible.
He's probably the best brawler like style in wrestling now.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
The thing that annoyed me, like I really kind of like this match actually. For last man standing matches are rarely good. They have what Evan hates the most about wrestling, I think, or one of the things he hates most about wrestling is all the time just fucking lying around. And fucking last man standing matches have the most of that because people are down for like a 9 count.
This particular one did not seem that bad with that. Like there was some of that, but it did move along at a pretty good
There
clip.
are two things that really annoyed me about it though. The one thing is the whole fucking storyline about Adam Pearce, and then he just has no part in the match whatsoever. Like it was supposed to be him in the match originally, and then as part of the storyline, and then it ended up changing. And I like Adam Pearce, and I would have liked to see him play some kind of part in the match. That's one thing. The second thing was something that was actually really cool at first. So they do the gimmick where Reigns gets handcuffed. Reigns introduces the handcuffs, and then he gets handcuffed to one of the girders.
Yep.
And the ref starts counting because he's down, and he grabs the ref and slams the ref into the girder to knock him out and stop the count. That was great.
I thought that was great.
Then all they fucking had to do was leave the ref knocked out until Heyman opened the handcuffs. But instead, they bring in the other ref, and Heyman can't open the handcuffs. And the guy's counting, and then he just stops counting for no reason. And then finally, because they just can't do it, Reigns gets to his feet, showing that he wouldn't have been counted out anyway.
Yep.
And then they finally free him and open the handcuffs, and they just fucking ruined the whole spot.
Oh my God, that spot pissed me off entirely.
But if it wasn't for that, I thought they told a cool story here. There were a lot of innovative spots. And Roman just one of the great things about Roman is he brings this intensity, and I feel like he is living his life in his matches. It's not a character. He's not acting. That's who Roman is now.
Do you think it's years of aggression being suppressed through the years of trying to be the babyface squeaky clean guy is just coming out in these matches?
Yeah, I think he figured it out. So. I think he just figured it out. He figured out how to professionally
I don't think he had a problem being the babyface. I think some of the fans did, which is why it didn't connect.
Yeah, if you look at his work in early NXT, he has some pretty decent promos. He can talk. He has a way with people. And then all of a sudden, when he goes after post Shield, it just goes away.
He didn't have a distinctive character. They finally figured out who Roman Reigns is, and it required him turning heel, which they were reluctant to do for a long time because whether the fans are cheering for him in the arenas or not, he was still selling tons of merchandise. He still brings a lot of viewers in. And so, including people who just want to look at him,
Mm-hmm. So yeah, he does his job as a heel, and as painful as it is for me to say this, he doesn't, unfortunately, I'm just going to say he pisses me off entirely. He gets me pissed. I don't like him as a heel. You did it. Congratulations. You did your job as a heel. You got me to be really fucking frustrated at you and to feel this way for a huge amount of time throughout my day. And it comes at the expense out of all these great wrestlers who, after many years in wrestling, seems to finally be getting their due, and then all of a sudden they don't. It's happened to Kevin Owens. It's happening to Cesaro. Oh my gosh, the guillotine. I was gonna say I don't like that finisher, but now that I think about it, it's probably the best finisher for him right now. It's certainly better than the spear. The spear.
Yeah, I don't know why wrestlers throw spears. I'll give Bill Goldberg a lot of shit for a lot of reasons, but his spear always looked like it murdered his opponent. And almost everybody that's done the spear since, their spear has either been okay or it sucked.
Yeah. Edge's spear.
So I'm going to ask for everybody's final thoughts. I'm going to ask myself for my final thoughts, and I'm going to tell me that I can't believe Roman Reigns didn't change his big move when he became a heel.
He did.
Because
he does
he still does the fucking jump punch.
Oh yeah.
He added one, but he still does the jump punch. You got to remember
that his shitty moveset is part of him being okay, fine. Don't remember it. But his shitty moveset is part of what people like AJ are going to boo about him now.
I guess that you know what there's me still learning about wrestling, that I'm like, well, this thing is stupid. It's like, I know, but the fact that it's stupid is what is works about it now. It's like, oh shit. So I guess before it was just dumb, but now it's like, oh, now you got to make the dumbness work for you.
The detail of him turning heel so sharply really changes the context of almost everything else that he does a lot. And you were saying it.
No, that's it. That's my final thought.
Oh, okay. Wait. I thought, I don't know. I like this match. I like the whole program that Owens and Reigns had going into it. Owens came in, he had a great spot here. There is an art to keeping away the participants of the big main event until it's time to have the big main event. Mick Foley was in that spot a lot, and we knew, like, okay, the WrestleMania main event, your main eventers there were ended up being Bryan and Edge and Roman, and those three had to be kept apart until WrestleMania. And it was Owens' job to keep Reigns occupied for months before WrestleMania, or before the WrestleMania program. He did a great job of that. They give Owens these big main events because they know he'll always deliver. They know his fans will always come back, hoping that this will be the time he takes the title. And instead of taking the title, he takes home gigantic paychecks to his family. And as somebody in the wrestling business, I salute that very, very much. And I thought it was pretty good.
Another cool contrast they built between the two characters was they both talk about their family a lot. And Roman is like, I'm the head of the table. I'm the one who provides for the whole Samoan dynasty and this and that. Owens has been very open about his kid and how important he is to him. He named himself after it, right? His kid's name is Owen, right?
Yeah, he named him after Owen Hart, which is...
And he named him after Owen Hart,
And sort of like, oh, I do this out of love. And what did he say about Roman? Roman does it out of...
He does it. He pretty much does it out of, like... Well, not even arrogance, but, like, the fact that, like, he gets a sense of narcissism. Like, he has to be in charge. Right. He has to be the center of attention. Like, you know what? Fine. I'm hated for being the center of attention for years. Guess what? I'm going to be the center of attention now, and you will all dislike it.
Acknowledge me.
I will acknowledge what?
I think that acknowledge me shit is great.
Acknowledge what? What am I acknowledging? What am I not acknowledging?
Oh, that he's the head of the table. He says that almost exclusively to members of his family.
I'm sorry. I hear head of what, and all I hear is dead air. Like, what are you talking about, man? I hear dead air.
No tables. Yeah. They got to bring in Devon. He knows about the tables. Ben, do you remember going to Ring of Honor shows and seeing Kevin Steen's wife look away whenever big spots happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
her and the Briscoes' mom.
Right, and the Briscoes' mom.
Oh.
They had a lot of kids.
AJ, anyway, your final thoughts.
Yeah, what do you got, buddy?
So while they did work very well in this match, I thought some of the missed spots were misplaced a little bit. Like, I was gonna say the golf cart spot, while I did enjoy it, I would have saved that for the end of the match. I would have saved that for Roman just finally just getting really angry and just putting him down and burying him, which is a little bit ironic because I didn't like the fact that Kevin Owens was buried at the end with the finish that they went with. And
he wasn't buried. I'm just going to completely contradict you at that. He lost the match. That's not a burial. He went toe-to-toe for months with a main event program with the champion, and then they gave him a singles match at WrestleMania. If that's being buried, please sign me up for being buried.
Okay, perfect.
But this match didn't really do a great job of kind of building the moves from, like, they hit each other with their finishers right from the beginning. They were pulling out the big guns right away. So I take your point on that one. I think, maybe that could have been placed. But they had the whole segment of the match that was in the back. And then they had to come back to do the finish in front of the non-crowd. Which they didn't.
Yeah. Also
the Thunderdome.
Also the referee coming out of nowhere, like after the referee getting like knocked out, and the fact that the fact that Roman Reigns is basically doing a slot squat while still handcuffed. I'm like, then then there's no point of handcuffing. There really isn't.
Oh, that spot went so wrong, like so badly, and like what can you do? The handcuffs wouldn't come off, right? It was terrible. Evan, did you at least find that amusing that the finish was completely botched up there?
I did. I have to say
Okay.
I did. The fact that they like, the fact that they kind of were a lot sloppier than the other two, than the other match, really worked for me.
Yeah,
I think
there's something to
because
that.
it
For
presented
sure.
agreed.
a sense of not necessarily authenticity, but you know what? It's like you were talking about, like that. There has to be that improvisatory element, I think, for wrestling to feel real, because it is supposed to. The fact that we all know that it's quote unquote not real, like you still don't want to stretch that too far, and that's the issue with when it gets into very heavily choreographed territory. Is like, like if I'm seeing, if I'm watching a movie, if I'm watching like a kung fu movie or something, like obviously the beauty of that is like this really long, intense choreography, something like that. But when you're watching wrestling, yeah, I don't know, it can turn into a dance in a way that it's not that the dance itself is inherently bad or uninteresting, but in this context, it's like still need some thread of a thought that a fight is occurring.
We just watched a bunch of Terry Funk matches where he doesn't do anything crisp or clean or athletic.
No,
nothing,
he largely appears to just be fighting people. I don't know if I like that. If I like that, but like that might also be a bit far.
Okay.
I mean,
in the other direction for me.
New Jack was the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like when you're watching Star Trek, it's like somebody doesn't go, "Oh no, it's the Cardassians. They're shooting missiles at our ship," and then someone else doesn't say, "Don't worry, they're actually just our buddies in makeup." It's like, yeah, we know, but you don't say it out loud.
That's something that I've been thinking about lately, just because I've rewatched all Star Trek over the last 15 months. Is that like sometimes an issue that I can have with the newer Star Trek is that they have like too much of a budget. And that, like, when old Star Trek, when they were like, all right, well, we have $80 to make this episode, so we better just write some really good dialogue and have really good actors, like, do it. That really, that forces you to be good in a lot of ways, and that forces you to kind of do some interesting things. And it's almost like when you've got, like, two, I don't know, really attractive wrestlers who like work out all of their moves like in a really detailed way, in a way that is like the thing that they always so they're executing the wrestling that was always their fantasy, right? And then like you watch Star Trek Discovery and it kind of feels like, oh, this is this is what I wanted Star Trek to be when I was 12. This is what I thought I wanted it to be, with like, oh, like they could do explosions and have laser karate and shit. And then you watch it and you're like, I liked it better when it was actually just like low budget, like ethical conundrums.
It's Cody Rhodes said of I think it was Cody Rhodes when NXT was really hot a few years ago. He was like, yeah, I could have the match of the year every time out if I had 3 months to rehearse it too. But the amazing thing is when the guys are on the road for wrestling 4 nights a week, and you go to a fucking random house show match and they just kill it, with a match that they didn't rehearse at all, probably, it has a different kind of magic to it for sure.
Alrighty, well, I hope everybody listening enjoyed this episode. AJ, I cannot thank you enough for coming into the Lion's Den here and making a hell of a case.
Yeah,
making
thanks,
a hell of a case
AJ.
Thank you
for
very
Gargano.
much.
And
great to talk to you.
And I'd like to thank you very much for having me here on the podcast. It's been very fun to listen to all of your opinions, get all of your different insights on how wrestling basically works as an art form, and also to get torn apart by liking Johnny Gargano. I'm deeply sorry, but like
No, you're good, man. You're good. Gargano's clearly very popular. There's something about him that a lot of people like. Like, I didn't like him at first when I first saw him on the indies, because I immediately saw him copying the people that I did like, and to this day, little has changed. But that's my opinion, and I also started watching wrestling, like, to the point where I was seeing all these copies. And, like, 2009, that's a while. but it ain't that long. So good. Enjoy Johnny Gargano. Don't let any of our opinions stop you from enjoying.
Oh,
Johnny
absolutely
Gargano.
not.
That's like
Absolutely not. I'm buying his T-shirt
yeah.
after this podcast. I hope he knows.
It's
Go
the
do
big
it.
one.
You know.
All right. Well,
I couldn't tell you
Right.
what his. Yeah, I couldn't tell you what his.
I'm really
catchphrase is.
glad we
Go for it.
finally got to have this conversation, AJ.
Yeah, man.
And,
Thank you.
Definitely. This has been Contesting Wrestling. We love you.
Adios.